Alright, so today we have another special video, and guess what? Oh no, it's a Sony! Oh my god, Sony is bad! Oh no! I just hope that we can be mature about me talking about, you know, Sony. I consider myself to be an avid Fuji user, but I do know the pros and cons of a Fujifilm system. I am also a big fan of technology regardless of the brand, so if it pushes the culture forward, I'm here for it. So I only had this camera for a few weeks now, so this is not a full review. I just want to talk about my overall first impressions of this camera and share with you guys my experience shooting with this camera for a few weeks as a Fujifilm shooter. So I do have a bit of history with Sony cameras. My first mirrorless camera was a Sony a6300, and I used that as my travel camera around Australia. But then shortly after, I got rid of that for the Fujifilm X-T2, and the rest was history. However, due to Fujifilm's autofocusing kerfuffle and my experience with previous Sony cameras in the past, I just wanted to see if the Sony a6700 would be a good camera for everyday use, for hybrid use, and a little bit of photo and video for like social media use as well. Right off the bat, I really like the way this camera looks. It has a small little grip that reminds me of the Fujifilm XS20, although I do find that the XS20 is a bit more comfortable to hold than this camera right here. This camera is like really small too, and as I was holding it, it reminds me of the Sony a7C II, like to the T. I don't know if they used the exact same like shell and just slapped on an APS-C sensor inside, but it does feel similar. Everything about it feels the same, from the memory card slot, the battery doors, the USB door ports, button placements. They all feel similar to the Sony a7C II. I don't have the Sony a7C II here to compare it to because again, I loaned that to my friend while he's on his honeymoon. I can't be so sure if it's like the same size or not. But for me, if it's anything like the Sony a7C II, I feel that in order to make the shooting experience better on the a6700, it's going to need some sort of grip from like small rig or something just to make it feel a bit more comfortable to hold. I shot a couple of portrait sessions with it and used it as an everyday camera, trying to go out and grab sample photos to share with you guys. And I do like the photos that I took with this camera, although I still lean towards the Fuji colors and their film simulations whenever I edit. I've come to accept that whenever I shoot with Sony cameras, I won't be able to make my photos look like it was taken on a Fuji camera. When I shifted my mindset away from making everything look like it was shot on a Fuji camera, that's when I enjoyed the photos coming from the Sony a6700 a little bit more. As a Fujifilm channel, I will always hold everything to like a Fuji image quality standard first, because I still love the image coming from the Fujifilm cameras. I love their colors and I love their color science, and as well their film simulations is a big part of how I edit my photos as well. Maybe that's unfair because image quality and colors are totally subjective after all, but I will say this though, I do the same thing with Sony's autofocusing whenever I compare other brands' other autofocusing system as well. But more on the autofocusing later. Like I said, I really enjoyed the photos that I took. I enjoyed the photos for what it is. I've come to appreciate what Sony can provide as a camera. The images I got are insanely sharp, it's full of detail, and it's so crispy, and I was pleasantly surprised. Skin tones still need to be worked on, but I find that it's a lot better today than it was 7 years ago when I used to own the Sony a6300, where the Sony pukey vomit greens were more prominent. But skin tones on the Fujifilm cameras are way better than on the Sonys. I'm just gonna say that right there. It is what it is. This camera has a 26 megapixel sensor inside, and with all the 40 megapixel high resolution cameras that I got, like the X100VI and the X-T5, I appreciate the 26 megapixel sensor because I'm saving a lot more on storage. I've always said that the 40 megapixel isn't necessary for the general users out there. I find that 24 to 33 megapixel sensor to be good enough for most people. And by the way, the lens that I used with the Sony a6700 is the Tamron 17-70 f2.8, and the Brighton Star 50mm f1.4 for the APS-C E mount. Again, everything just looks sharp and crispy on a Sony. So if you prefer that, crispy, sterile looking image, chances are you're going to like this camera. One of the reasons why I enjoyed shooting with this camera is for the same reason why I like shooting with my Fujifilm cameras. For its size, I'm someone that prioritizes small, easy to stow away, compact cameras with insane tech packed inside. And this Sony a6700 delivers on that. I was walking around the town with this camera and I just was pleasantly delighted by how small it is, by how light it is. Just, taking pictures, acquiring focus really fast with the subject detection whenever I'm shooting, the locals in this town. And I do like the mechanical shutter on this camera. It sounds so freaking satisfying. The video specs on this camera is incredible as well. It can do up to 4K 120p with a 1.5 times crop. However, I don't really use the 4K 120 as much as I thought I would. I'm happy with just the 4K 60 for slow motion. Speaking of 4K 60, it looks great on this camera as well. I was filming some B-roll and I find the footage to look real good and freaking sharp as well. And I think it's because the fact that you are getting oversampled 6K on this sensor. So if you're filming anything from 4K 24 to 4K 60, you're going to see a much more sharper looking footage because of the oversampling that this camera does. And also do S-Log 3 10-bit 422 footage, making this camera a very good video camera or a hybrid camera. Other than that, I have no issues with the video footage. I am accustomed to the way Sony video files look now. Whenever I record and log, I just slap on a phantom LUT and it just looks freaking great. Now we gotta talk about the autofocusing on this camera. This autofocusing system is amazing. It's really great, and this camera has the latest AI chipset inside that you can find cameras like the Sony a7C2, the Sony a7R5, and the Sony ZEV1, I believe. What this means is that it does a great job at detecting the subjects in front of you, anticipating where that subject would move, and locks onto that subject very, very well. When I was using this camera for portrait photography, it was so easy for the camera to latch onto the closest eye and stick to that subject like glue. It was honestly so sticky, man. And while the Sony autofocusing was locking onto the eye, it just freed my mind up to just focus on the composition, which I do appreciate. And it didn't give me false positive like my Fujifilm X-T5 did. I actually had to double check a couple of times on the back of the Sony's LCD screen to make sure that the eyes were definitely in focus. But after a couple of tries, I trusted the camera completely to the point where I stopped checking. And honestly, the autofocusing is great for video as well. It's smart enough to know what I want in focus, and I let the AI tracking do its thing. So another thing that I really like on this camera is the touch-to-track autofocusing for video. Again, I think Sony implements this the best. I tried touch-to-tracking on the Panasonic S5 II and now on the Fujifilm X100VI, and again, it's not as sticky and reliable as something like on the Sony. And again, the reason why I like this is because I can let the camera do its thing and have it pull focus for me while I slowly sway back and forth whenever I need to grab B-roll and just focus on the composition. Now, is there anything that I don't like about the Sony a6700? I'm probably gonna say this with all entry-level Sony cameras. It's the EVF. I've been saying this about Sony cameras for time now. The EVF on this camera isn't great. Like, Sony puts so much into their cameras when it comes to tech, but they really skimp out on the EVF and the LCD screen as well. For me, I feel like I have like a different use case because I live in a place where it's like sunny all the freaking time. And when that happens, the LCD screen and the EVF really doesn't do much to counteract the sunny weather condition. The EVF on the X-T5 is much better in my opinion. Another thing I don't really like is the grip. It just feels a bit uncomfortable to hold like the Sony a7C2 right out of the box. So you may need to get like a small rig hand grip just to make it feel better to hold in your hands. That's all the things I can think of so far. Again, this is just my first impression of the camera. So I was thinking of doing a comparison video between the Fujifilm X-T5 against the Sony a6700. So if you want to see that video, let me know and subscribe to my channel for when that video comes out. I'm just hoping to do this video once I get a better firmware update on the X-T5 so I can compare both cameras autofocusing, because I want to give the X-T5 a fair fight. Because as of right now, with the current firmware update that I got inside my camera, I know that the X-T5 would get slaughtered in the autofocusing department, so there's no contest. So I really want Fuji to fix that autofocusing issue so that we can put the X-T5 head-to-head with the a6700 properly. And again, I hope to provide you guys with a full review once I get some more time with this camera. But as for now, I do enjoy all the things that this camera has to offer. And it's coming in at a price where it's competitive to like the Fujifilm XS20, and it's cheaper than the X-T5. This is ridiculous. And with all the tech that is offered inside this camera, I think this camera could be the better hybrid camera than the Fujifilm cameras that I've mentioned. But I won't say that definitively as of yet. I still need more time before I can make a conclusion. But as for now, I think this is a good camera for me. It's good for social media. It's good to be an everyday camera, provided you get the right lens for it. It's good for being a travel camera because of its size. So if you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to my channel for more gear related videos like this. And if you're interested in this camera, I'll leave the links down below for you to check out. But what are your thoughts on the Sony a6700? Do you guys have one? What is your experience with this camera? Do you guys like it? Let me know down in the comments below. And thanks so much.